Hey everyone, it's Morgan here with Arthur for the first edition of what will hopefully be many of the podcast. So let's take it, see how it goes. The podcast is all about dealing with challenging clients, what they did that's crazy, mistakes we made, how we solved it, what we learned from it. And Arthur is one of my oldest and closest friends, and frankly, one of the inspirations behind this podcast because we've been talking about his crazy, difficult clients for years, and he has lots of great stories, especially when he's in a good mood and just went hiking. So hopefully, he is. Arthur, tell us a story about one of your clients, and let's run with it.
Sure. Just for the record, I'd like to note that my name is pronounced Artur. Morgan and I, we've kept it as Arthur because first half of my life till I was 18, I was called Arthur officially. And I believe his dad is also named Arthur.
That's right.
So it's just a matter of habit. So we'll allow, this bastardization to come along.
I've only made this mistake about 11 million times.
It's great. No, it flashes me back to a former self. So it's nice. Okay. I've been doing consulting with my digital studio since 2006. So, about, what is it now? 15 years or so of a plethora of clients you can imagine in projects. And one of the more colorful ones have always been the first time entrepreneurs who have an idea that either comes to them kind of suddenly or something that they've been thinking about for many years, and they finally decide to go for it. And those are always to be very open. I think they're the most exciting and most exhilarating types of projects because that's the nature of startups, right?
A sense of what's coming.
Yes. So we always, I've always had being a startup entrepreneur myself, having launched my own little experiments over those years alongside of consulting with other entrepreneurs. It sort of kind of goes hand in hand because I'm in that headspace. And so we could, always focus on that workflow and those difficulties that are unique to startups. And every time I do one, and if I have, various degrees of success or failure, I try to take those lessons learned and apply them back into our customers, our clients' roles and projects.
Makes sense.
So, having said that, one would think that after a few startups under your belt and a few clients that you've launched here and there, that you would, have everything kind of fully under control and everything down and everything's just like now, a beautiful, automated science of, the scientific method and what have you, and everything just perfectly, without goes to one phase to another without fail, and it's just this beautiful wrapped up little package. Ironically, it's not, and it's really my belief that it's just really comes down to the nature of what startups are by default. So these are high risk projects that have statistically proven high probabilities of failure. And once that is sort of like a given physics of, that industry, then you're kind of, you're always going to get various degrees of failures for various different reasons, because when you're dealing with, again, the startup, there's not just one delta point, but there's many constantly moving delta points of entropy that can take this project off the rails and just have it, kind of do a death spin into a crash, and then boom, and then it's just a question of, as a consultant who's trying to provide services for customers who are expecting success with a very high risk project, you're trying to mitigate a lot of that failure as best as possible, and in the most ideal way, in the most essential way, to mitigate the personal liability and risk against you as a provider of services to said startups. So the last project, I think, was almost a beautiful case study of like all these things that could go wrong under the perfect storm. And I'd like to, and because it's the last project, it's most fresh in my mind, so I could definitely touch upon that in greater detail than any other pseudo-failed projects that we've had. We have more of a success rate than we have failure rates, but the failure rates, when the failed ones can be painful with various degrees. And this last one was, I think, the most for me personally, because there was a personal element involved in it, which never was before to any other prior projects. So that was a very big lesson to learn.
Let's jump into the recent case in a moment. I'll preface it with two comments on what you said. First, good reminder that you've had many more successes than failures. Part of the concept behind this podcast is, even if you have a 1 in 100 failure rate, no one talks about it, but it's so emotionally intense and powerful, and we want to learn from it to avoid it. Hopefully this podcast will become a forum to talk about that 1% of the blowups. Second perfect recommendation I want to make is you observe that startups are much more likely to have these sorts of problems for a few reasons. You said, I want to add another reason, which is who's attracted to start a startup. People with lots of ideas, by definition. I have an idea, I want to do something, and people with lots of ideas as clients will be the sort of person changing direction, changing things every 2 seconds. And as a consultant or implementer, that's a massive red flag and very risk prone. So that's another reason why, by the nature of working with startups, these sorts of client challenges are more likely.
Absolutely. And it's like you said, it's these folks who have lots of ideas, and especially first-time entrepreneurs. What I find the pattern that's very clear is there's a lot of energy that they have about this idea. It's their baby.
Yes.
They project a lot of their own personal tastes and life experiences into it. And so they're not very objective at all by definition. And I totally understand. Right. I've been in that position many times. And so there's a challenge to kind of, when you're working on a project that they're trying to essentially solve, not for themselves, even though the idea may have come from a personal problem they may have, but they're really trying to solve it to a particular market and space and demographic and cohort that is not directly associated to them. Then there's that challenge of them having to really step out of their own skin and see that this product is really, their brand is not about them. It's about, the problem space, and, to try to get their egos, away. But at the same time, it's a customer, it's a client. You will always be dealing with their egos. So you can't, your communication and the way you approach them has to be very delicate. You can't just right up front say, Bob, man, I hear you, but that is a
stupidest idea I've ever heard.
I'm sorry, but I refuse to do it. And this last project, as I get into it, there was a situation where, I had to vocalize that in some respectful way. And it just, it wasn't enough. And it was one of the learning mistakes that kind of bit me in the butt at the end of the day.
This is a great preface. Let's dive into the dirty details. Tell us the story.
Okay, I'm gonna try to be as objective about it as possible, and to give it a bit of
Understood.
more of to give it a bit of a more uh, origin story from where things started, and maybe even give maybe a present a little perspective from the founder's point of view as he
Sure.
presented it to us. You know, so.
Sure.
The whole thing really started with a very old dear friend of mine that we went to school with. I've known him for 20 years. He's a creative technologist, very talented human being, did a lot of amazing installations and animations and things like that. I was always quite fond of his work, but we never had a chance to work with each other for different reasons. And a few times we came close, but didn't happen. And he was always involved in agencies of various sizes, other large digital enterprise companies that were much more mature and had a different life cycle of different products that they would work on. And he would be leading either as a CTO role or leading, the production, the creative team around it. But these were not startups. Okay, very important to preface that. Suddenly, he had this opportunity where he knew from the grapevine somebody who had this amazing idea. This is, by the way, at the few months into COVID, right? So everybody's on the lockdown. There's a lot of new things happening across the culture, and people are starting to kind of brood and think about ways to kind of get by, and not only just to get by this period of lockdown, but also, project maybe how things would be different post lockdown, and maybe,
and everyone started going a bit crazy, like what the fuck is happening? So
yes, there's a sense of mass hyper normalization and nutsoids, just being in cabin fever. So all that built up energy, culminated in this guy, my dear friend Josh, calls me up, says, "Hey, I've got this client. He's got this crazy idea and some personal savings to get it to, an MVP." And it sounds really exciting, challenging, and I think this is finally a great opportunity to have the opportunity to work with you and to activate your team and you, because we need to have a front end designer, UX designer, and we need a production team to make this happen. And I'm the CTO. He's hiring me as the CTO, as a product lead owner, and I'm going to work with him to basically translate his idea that he already by himself has had some success with. This was very interesting. He took a existing technology such as Zoom, and I believe it was Mixlr, this is a streaming music service. And with those two things together, those two apps open, he was able to create a bi-weekly remote party with a live performing DJ that would stream on the Mixlr service. And then all these people in their homes, under lockdown, with little disco balls and lights, all invited to a certain, time and day to experience as much as they can a sense of, musical enjoyment and togetherness that one could have as much as you can digitally. And I tried it out. He said, "Hey, there's going to be a party this Saturday. Come check it out." And of course, I had nothing to do Saturday night, and turned it on. And there was actually a really good DJ. You pour yourself a drink or two, and next thing you know, you kind of lose that sense of isolation. Because everybody seems to be in the same vibe. Basically, they're all hearing the same song. They're all in the same, general state of mind with the lockdown, and just want to have an hour or two of just healthy aerobic exercise, enjoy music, and you could even chat with people, on Zoom and all that. So he did that for many, many weeks, many months, and managed to get a following and managed to see that there's something really special here. And I felt that too. And I thought, wow, you know what? This is pretty good. And I could see this really working out quite well globally for people, especially even post-COVID, who are just simply by their physical location, they can't get to a club and go out and experience this thing as they would in real life, right? So especially folks like me who came from an urban environment, who did this before, remembered what that feeling was like, and want to recreate it in some way again. So they had a really good base there for an idea, and they proved it in their very kind of minimal, low tech way. Again, like the experience was very low quality because Zoom is not really made to perform in this way. They spackled together. Everything was kind of spackled together, but they managed to do it. And then they said, well, what if we did this idea, but built from the ground up, purpose built for these needs, which were high quality video, multiple people on a concurrent video feed, and chatting, and high quality sound. That was also quite an important feature. So we had a conversation, a discovery call about it. They already had, by the time we got, they activated us, they already had about a month of prior iteration on the concept of the product. They hired, my friend hired another mutual alumni who was very brilliant to make the business deck, to think through the business model, and to create even a pretty decent early stage wireframe. And so for us coming in, we didn't completely start from everything. They had, a general rough idea there, and we were tasked to solve it. One of the first things that we recognized in order, for this thing to really, have any chance of success was the core video streaming engine that they needed built. We, as a team, did not have those capabilities. And we said that although we have worked with a former tech partner who was actually also part of the same alumni school that me and my friend went to. He hired us before for a very large live project. And we had a great working relationship on that project. And he was leading all the really heavy lifting cloud infrastructure for that project. Okay. It was a live app for FIFA and a lot of moving parts. And it was very similar to what this project that we're about to go do, in the sense that you're dealing with live services and video streaming. And it was an event-based kind of project. So we contacted Mr. Neil, and he said, wow, this sounds challenging. I'd love to work again with you guys. And I think I could pull this off with, the right services that he already had in mind. So we're like, great. So we offered ourselves essentially to the client and to my friend who's the CTO, and say, hey, we've got Neil. Neil, meet the team. Neil is going to be doing all the core, the really difficult stuff, the cloud infrastructure, the video streaming services. And we, as Design to Dev, we will do the front end desktop application. Before, there were talks about doing the mobile one as well, but we all as a team, all of us on engineering and my friend CTO, made this early call saying, hey, let's deal with mobile later, and these are the reasons why, and everyone agreed, and the client was convinced, and we went into production. Now, what we wanted to make sure was that Neil, even though we brought him in the sense of we've procured him as a vendor for a core aspect of the application, we ensured in the contract that Neil was not part of design to dev. Neil has his own consulting company. So he is separate from our contract. And in our contract, we specifically stated that we are not responsible for anything that Neil is responsible to deliver. We are working with him. In fact, he is leading our team in many aspects, and so is the CTO of your company. But we're working with him on different aspects of the project, where essentially the front end application needs to start talking to the cloud services that he's building. So there's going to be, some coupling there that my team and his team and him need to kind of iron out. But he's taking the lead when it comes to that. So we thought, okay, contractually that seems pretty clear and fair and great. And it was even better for us because the CEO started offering or asking everyone involved in the project. He was also offering equity, right? Which a lot of founders sometimes do to lower the cost. And we politely turned that down. And Neil actually took that as an opportunity, and he managed to work out a separate equity deal. And that was
Artur,
great.
Pause. I have a question. The listeners don't know the disaster that's going to unfold yet, but you do. So I'm wondering if at this point, you think in retrospect, you should have done anything wrong. It's like a smart idea to have him separated out. So he's not part of your team, but in retrospect, could you have done anything differently at that point?
Okay. So at that juncture, in regards to separating out our teams and our responsibilities, no, I think it was evidently clear to everybody. You could have, looking at the contract, you could be much more, let's say, verbose and outline what those roles were. Like one of the things that wasn't named or outlined was my friend's name, his full name in the contract, saying he was in charge of, he was the CTO, and these are his roles. It was mentioned in the contract that the company's CTO would lead this and this and this. But he wasn't named. Okay. So the point being is any kind of information that you have that you already know is going to be, it doesn't hurt to put it into contract, because it just literally confirms to everybody who's signing it that this is what it is, at least today. Obviously, and then if things change later down the line, you could append the contract and everybody could co-sign that. But the more amorphous and ambiguous it is, the worse risk you have for it to be later in a litigation case misinterpreted into their favor, right? So you need to spell it out more and more. At that contractual phase, there were other errors that we made because of haste. One of them was I did not fundamentally hire a lawyer at the time to then draft up our ideal contract to give to them and to use his litigational skills, again, in cooperation and collaboration with my clients' lawyers, to try to come together to a contract format, whether it was for them to, at the end, use our contract or use their contract with our terms. So I used a contract that I've had for many years, and I felt that at that time felt was pretty solid. But obviously, I'm not a lawyer. So if a lawyer looked at that, he would have said, oh, interesting term here that, by the way, I left this detail out. They didn't want to use our contract. They wanted to use their contract. And he made this very innocuous comment saying, as I'm starting on this project, this is the CEO talking, and I'm having contracts with all these other people on the team, my lawyers feel comfortable if we can just use the same contract for everyone, right? It actually makes rational sense and it's easy. But on the other hand, it doesn't, because everybody's relationship and responsibilities are very different. The contract he has with his CMO is a different work flow and relationship than with a vendor and the technical team. So I said, okay, that's okay, but I just want to make sure that these terms, whatever, there were a handful of them, these are deal breakers for us, and I really would like them to be put into your boilerplate contract. They looked at it, they said yes to all of them except one, and that was like a first flag. And again, I didn't really think much about it at the time because it seemed innocuous. But looking back after the failure, it all makes sense why they would say that. And that term was very simple. It was something that no other past clients had a problem with because it was very rational. It said the following: if they decide to cancel at any time, that there would be a 2-week buffer from the time that they cancel, that we as a team, and we specified, I believe it was 80 hours, that we would have those 80 hours paid for, and they would be used for the following things that every project, every project that gets canceled requires, which is a team transition, because maybe, for example, they don't like something that our team did and they want to hire a better team. There's gonna need to be a transition period between the development team, or just simply tasks for documentation and making sure everything is nicely wrapped up, and for them. So there's work that needs to be done, and I explained it to the CEO that this is actually in his interest. It behooves him to have this time allocated because it reserves and, frankly says, we can't, as a team, us that you're firing, we can't disappear. We still have some fiduciary obligations to, make sure this ends correctly. And it's only 80 hours, right? So it's not like we're forcing them to do 800 hours. But he's like, you know what? That's okay. I still prefer not to have it. And if it ever comes to something like that, I'm pretty confident, I'm pretty sure Artur will work it out. We'll work something out. And I said, well, if that's, if you want to remove that level of warranty, essentially, that's on you. But I'm explaining to you how it's going to benefit you. It's not really for us. And he was like, no, it's okay. I'll fly cowboy solo on this because, I'm sure we could, I don't want to put it in writing. And to me, that was like, not a very smart, just general CEO move. It's
also not just smart. It's not respectful for you. Like, you hired any employee, everyone has 2 weeks notice, like standard employment terms. And you're not looking for other work. So it's respectful to have a few weeks. So I think one lesson from here is, in the very beginning, if they do weird things that are, let's say, disrespectful, like wanting to take out 2 weeks notice, a very standard term, then that should set off yellow flags early on, so you start paying attention earlier. Exactly.
And I mean, even the word disrespectful doesn't even come in. It's almost just exotic. It's just out of the normal standards. And when that happens, that's the red flag. And it needs to be, you need to, at the end of the day, if you say, okay, you're okay with it, but are you personally okay with it? Because if that situation happens, you're out there flying in the wind. Are you going to be okay with that? I know you feel today it's a 1% chance, but if it does happen, are you going to be okay with it? And maybe you are okay with it. Maybe you can take that kind of damage and walk away from it. It's no big deal, but maybe you shouldn't. And maybe, it's why do it, right? Again, this is the beginning of the relationship, right? So like anything else, you want to show good faith. You want to show some level of service. You want to show, I don't want at the beginning of this to start haggling.
That's actually a really good point. That when you're just starting a relationship, you want to be especially nice and generous towards them.
Yes.
And this is a good point, because like that can backfire if things go wrong. So maybe another lesson is early on, you need to force yourself to push back a little bit more than your initial generous instinct.
And what that does is it creates, I think, a sort of set of working standards and relationships saying, hey, I can show you in many ways as a service provider my generosity. For example, I offered them a discount on the first 500 hours that we're going to work together. Okay, so that's a very clear, gesture. And then, but if I do this, I like to see some gesture on your end in some capacity. So yeah, and it establishes also a certain kind of, in a very subtle way, like a collaborative type of relationship versus I am, the customer and I'm always right, which they're not. And they're hiring you as an expert consultant to make sure you're doing your job. So you just need to say, in order for me to do my job the best way, I need these parameters. Otherwise, it's just foolish for me to go into it. So again, this is the beginning of this essential same paradox, which is, you try to control as much of this chaos as possible, but at the end of the day, you are not the CEO of a startup. They are. You are there. You're providing a service. The contract, if you looked at it very cleanly, it essentially was a work for hire contract. I am a service provider. So therefore, I'm obligated, to fulfill certain things in the particular parameters that are outlined in the contract. Now, we outlined, again, that this is a startup. That means there's an MVP. That means that there is a fluid scope, because you will be iterating. You will have lots of ideas. We actually like that. We're into people like that. We will engineer that kind of flexibility and course correction because it's a startup. And you, as a CEO, will have unknown variables in the marketplace come at you week for week with different opportunities, and that we as a service provider are going to try using our agile methodology to accommodate you in every possible way so that you can capitalize on these opportunities and make sure that if your assumption was A when you started, and now you see the market change a bit and you need to change the product very quickly, and instead of making feature A, make feature B, we want to give you as much abilities to do that so that your chances of survival and getting the MVP out that has traction will have great success, so that we could come back to us and we can have the next round of product development. So we start off and we have a call, team calls. We're all talking about how this project's going to happen, who is doing what. This is very also key as part of my process with a new founder entrepreneurs. He wasn't a complete new person to entrepreneurialism. He ran a successful film commercial shooting production, post-production company in LA. So over years and years, he's built a successful company. He knows what it means to manage a team and have clients and have, milestones and all that. However, huge, difference. And I tried to tell him many times in many different ways is like, this is kind of be a bit of the inverse of what you're used to. And so you need to be mentally prepared for that this is not, we're not shooting a commercial where every single minute of that production has been planned and everything is executed, like a Formula One team, perfectly, executed. And it's the opposite. So, and I told him exactly what that means and that he needs to have that flexibility. And he, on the call, was totally aware and cognizant and understood it and was ready for that. And of course, he had his own new owner, new entrepreneurial risks and concerns to us before he really committed to the final payment, which was, hey, I'm worried that I'm going to be spending all this time and money, and then at the end of the day, I'm not going to have anything, is what he said.
Everyone's heard that a million times.
Yeah, exactly. And, again, we had to explain to him how we're going to try to mitigate that fear, at the same time saying, listen, let's be all clear what we're doing here. We're going into embarking on a project that has never been done before, using technology that we've never used before, technology that your CTO and Neil is saying that we should be using because they've supposedly done their due diligence, and they didn't at the end of the day. And this is going to be more of an R&D kind of style of work. And we're going to do our best to mitigate that risk so that we don't go months and months and months down the line where you end up with a completely useless product and wasted all your time. We also don't want that. It's not in our interest.
Something I always do at that point is I articulate these risk factors in a Google Doc, and all the time, like every week, I'll update them because it's very easy to have a conversation. Oh yeah, this can go wrong. Oh yeah, sure. But if it's always on the top of their mind, this will probably fail. This will probably fail. This will probably fail. Then if it fails, it's a lot less emotionally burdening on them because even if you tell them once, they're kind of secretly expecting it to succeed.
Exactly. And I have it all recorded, but again, that was for my own personal documentation. Right. Never thought I'd need to, but you could literally, yeah.
I like
language. You could have language in the contract. Yeah. And you could have, but just even language in the contract that literally says, listen, this is not just regular work for hire type of thing. This is the nature of this project is highly risky. We're going to get you to an MVP. And what is the MVP going to mean specifically? And blah, 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 blah. And so, well, again, so we embark on this thing. And one of the unique aspects of this structure of this project, again, that was different from any other ones that we've taken on was there was a key role that was in between us and the client, which we never usually have, which is my good old buddy, who's the CTO. So because of that, and because he's an old friend of mine, I by mistake, and it's a very natural thing to do, you let your guard down a bit, and because the assumption is that your friend will also have a bit of your best interest at heart, in the sense that he would also want to make sure that the working relationship is as good as it can be, and that if there's anything that comes into our universe that will make things worse for us as a production team, that he will find ways to resolve that and remove bottlenecks and de-risk things. And when he talks to the CEO, he will have our perspective also at the forefront of the project to explain to the CEO why things are going a certain way, or why we need to build certain things, why we can't.
I want to interrupt again. This is another risk factor. By the way, I like this. This is our first time doing this. I like this structure of pointing out the learnings as it's happening. I think this is another good learning, which is just because someone's a really old friend, you've known since college, 20 something years, you assume that they will act in your best interest. And I think, unfortunately, the old cliche that as soon as money is involved, people become crazy. So it's $5, and suddenly old friend Chow, I need it for $5. So it's important to always keep that on top of your mind. Yeah,
and again, there was assumptions that I made about the relationship, which was I thought he could play that role. And throughout the project, it became evidently clear. It had nothing to do between our relationship. It just had to do with he did not have hardly one iota of startup experience. So to be in that very, very, very important position, calling all the shots, he just was over his head. And we discovered that quite a bit early in this thing. And as a friend, what I tried to do was to help him do his job a little bit more and more easier, and try to edify him a little bit about, how he could look as good as he can in front of the CEO. And so we had conversations where, suddenly there was a major missed milestone that we as an engineering team told him time and time again that we can't make this milestone. It's not realistic. It's not a green light. Don't do it. Tell that to the CEO. And then he goes off and, again, because he's never been in that role, was overclocking expectations to the CEO, telling him a different story. Then it all came to a head where that weekend, that event didn't happen. It didn't launch. And suddenly the CEO is pissed off. And then suddenly he's in a bad situation. And the team is pissed off at Josh because we said, this was clearly told to you. We couldn't do it. What else can we tell? What else can we do? And not only that, this adds more pressure.
Let's say you made some important points, like huge milestone missed. He was telling something different to the CEO. I just want to articulate 2 lessons from there as well. You made an important point that your friend was also in over his head. So I think another good lesson is when you realize that the people you're working with are over their head, it's not enough to just advise them and guide them. Because if they're over there, it's like if someone's drowning, just saying, "Hey, flap your hands," like that's not going to help the drowning man. So, no. so I think one another lesson is when your client or your client's representative you work with is over their head, rather than just saying, "Hey, maybe you should do this." You need more drastic measures.
And we took those. We actually did that because we said this is a serious thing, and we do not want to continue this project if this is going to repeat like this. Because this is really could be completely avoided, and it's not the conditions that the whole team wants to work on. So the answer to us was quite simple. If there's a bad telephone game and you are cognizant, this is a good sign. Josh was very cognizant of these limitations that he had, and he was analyzing it, and he profusely apologized, and he tried to even think through where there was miscommunication. So he was trying to re-optimize himself. And we said, listen, the best, quickest way to solve this is let's put everybody on the same page by doing an all hands meeting that's weekly. So instead of siloed meetings between you and us engineering, it's going to have it with everyone. So everybody goes around the circle, says, here's what we're doing. Here's the expectation. FYI, we're thinking about this event or this opportunity. Maybe the team should know about this early on. Maybe I should know something about the feasibility of that milestone, so that there's and everybody agreed to those meetings, and it did help a lot. And even during those meetings, things were coming up that were like, oh, but I thought it would do this. And then we're like, no, it does that. And it was quickly ironed out during those calls. And they were the best, Band-Aids that we could apply at the time. And it was great. And so we kept going forward with that. And actually things were going quite well. We basically delivered an MVP to them we gave them a range of hours, and we delivered it in the mid-range. So that started to feel good for the team, for the client. He had a prototype that he could finally test on his users. And we started running these little tests, and these tests were these little events that, again, generally worked. And then there were little rough spots that we could see very clearly we need to, fix and work on. and everything was going swimmingly well. But it was still an MVP, and we still, saw it at this stage. And things, what happened was, again, COVID and people kind of having different ways of thinking during this time. The elephant in the room was really like, I think that the main issue that we didn't tackle much early on was a lot of the energy went into the nuances and the UX of the product, because it needed to have, the CEO was really focusing on it being very different from Zoom, which is what everybody was, using and doing. And he wanted to have a differentiator in the marketplace. And so we were working, our team, because we're dealing with the front end application, we were working on those details. But the elephant that was growing in the room was much more deadlier, which was, at the end of the day, for this to be a viable business, you need this thing to sustain a few hundred people for a live event. You can't just have 30, 40, 20 people and make a business model out of it. They needed at least a few hundred at scale to have large events where they could sell enough tickets, and because events took a lot of energy and time to produce. But that number, a few hundred, it was really never discussed early on. Or just it was very conceptually discussed, but it never became the number one assumption and pain point to solve or prove by the cloud engineering team or by the CTO who's leading the product. They were more focused at the time.
Since your team was in charge of building the technology and the CTO failed in never saying
Let me just be very clear.
Oh,
It's not we're in charge of building the technology. We're in charge of building the client app that is sitting on your computer that has really hardly any logic to it. It doesn't do all the beautiful magic that is the company, that is the experience. The experience comes from the cloud that is streaming the video and the music.
And that's what the other developer was doing, that had the separate contract.
Yes, exactly. And we were relying on them every step of the way, because we just read. We're just the terminal. We just read what's being given. So, and there were a lot of very unique challenges on the front end, on the client side, the UX, how things look, rules and conditions about, being in a conference, let's call it, and then being able to break out into breakout rooms and having very specific rules around that, how things look, how things work. Lots of work that needed to be done by my team there. But at the end of the day, we don't control the ability of that event to host 1,000 people and have those 1,000 people have a great experience on their computer. No, we don't control that. That needs to be specifically engineered with the algos and custom code on the cloud. So again, these details were clearly specified in the contract and talked about almost every meeting. So it wasn't like we hid this thing. Everybody knew these were the roles. And furthermore, the CTO, Josh, he's there every week, almost every other day, talking to all of the engineering and orchestrating things and calling the shots of saying, now these features are priority and these are less. Oh, we will say, well, this feature that you want as a priority, that's going to take a whole week just to get this one thing done. And he'll call the shots. He'll go back to the CEO and say, hey, do you think it's worth putting all that energy and time into this? It's going to cost us. Yes, no, great. No, fine. We move on. And our team gets the green light or red light of what to do every week. Great. And that got us through the MVP. So what changed along the way? Suddenly, after the MVP was out and they had 2 nice events that they tested, again, our team, having startup experience, was always, even on the first discovery call, I personally said to him, look, you need to make sure you test this thing rigorously. And if you expect to do a big consumer grade launch, and you're going to put all the time and energy into that launch, you need to really be sure that you don't wing that and that you have proper multiple tests that replicate that launch situation as close as possible before you actually go and spend all that money on hiring big talent and DJs and dancers and all that stuff, whatever you need to do for your launch. Like, prepare for it so that you don't have really any bad surprises. And by the way, FYI, there will be failures. And I even made a joke. I said, look at Bill Gates, look at Steve Jobs. Every time they went in and made a big launch event for their new product and they were doing their presentations, there was always a technical failure in their presentation. Something always happens. You could actually bet on it. So now that you know that entropy will be there, let's try to factor that in and de-risk it and have a plan B and have the plan C. And I told him this as a good customer, right. To prepare him mentally. And he's like, yeah, that totally makes sense. I'm all for it, blah, blah, blah. Let's do it. Yeah. So MVP, 2 events later of about 50 people, everybody's excited. They start to have a big investor meeting that we were all part of. And the CTO was pitching and he was like really excited about that. They were excited. And now there's all this pressure starting to grow around the MVP because they were using their personal money. They knew from the beginning of the contract that they need to expect to spend a maximum of X money, and they were ready for it. But they also knew that to get to the next commercial level and to launch, that it's going to take more an effort. And they already had in their mind a friends and family round and maybe even an angel or 2. And they started taking these calls and they were impressed by the advanced prototype that we already made. And so there's all this buildup. And so I think at some point, what happened was, this was around maybe September, early September, maybe last week of August. What's happening in the culture at the time? You have an upcoming election, right? And you don't know what the outcome of that will be. And in their mind, they started mixing that event and they started thinking, well, that's about the same time the voting in the early November, when based on our prior velocity and how we are building this app, we could start to see that, and we were telling them that it'll be in a better state and possibly ready for consumer grade launch in the end of the quarter, somewhere around there. You could kind of get a sense of it, but they weren't really, asking us at that level because we were only focusing on MVP. So suddenly he said, the CEO said, well, guys, right before the election, there's a wonderful, amazing once a year opportunity, Halloween, to throw a big, gangbuster event, commercial grade. We're going to invite big time DJs. We're going to have all of these performers in different rooms. We're going to spend all this time and energy in making pre-roll.
Arthur, I'm getting scared. You're building up. Oh no, what happens?
Right. And there's all this excitement because what in their calculus in their head was this, and this is how they expressed it. They said, because there's a 50-50 chance that the presidential election can go wrong. And if it goes wrong, meaning Trump gets a reset, gets a second term,
Be elected.
The speculation is that this would be the worst possible time for our product to launch afterwards or near around that time. There would be such a mass depression that we would lose any sense of like optimism and opportunity for an idea like this, which was, hey, let's go out and celebrate and enjoy, music and do it with friends remotely and blah, 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 blah. They really felt that this was like an existential threat to them. And therefore, ergo, Halloween, which is like the biggest nationwide positive thing, and everyone's really tired of the lockdown, we're going to really show the world how celebration can happen now on a very large remote level. And because of these last two tests, we feel really confident that we can get within, I think we had 6 weeks or so, 7 weeks, to get this thing quickly into gear, into shape, and get it to the next level. That's what they came to us. And we had an all hands meeting, and I very politely and very clearly told the CEO and everyone else on the team, the CMO, Neil, my team, I said, I'm going to respectfully, I totally understand your thinking, but I feel like based on my experience and our experience and all these other startups, that kind of arbitrary date and the outcome of that potential event, it won't have any real effect on your startup as you think it would. In fact, I personally think that if people do go into a depression, they're going to need something even better, to get them out of it. So it's like a win-win, thing. It just really depends on how you creatively spin the marketing and the communication, which they actually had a very good CMO to do. So I said at the end of that idea, a comment, I said another analogy. I said, listen, what we're building, again, it's very fragile. It's very delicate. It's at the MVP stage. It's like a baby. The baby has to go through a gestation development cycle of 9 months. You can't throw doctors at it to get it to development and come out faster. Yes. And have all the same, healthy things. By forcing this thing into this artificial acceleration, you are adding a lot of extra risk that doesn't need to be there. And he's like, you know what, Artur, I understand you. I appreciate that. But we feel at the end of the day, such an existential threat that he literally said, this is do or die. This is do or die. We feel like if we can't launch it for the Halloween thing and capitalize on all the people looking at us today and leveraging this amazing party atmosphere opportunity, then we can't springboard ourselves to the next, investment opportunity. That we would have to wait out many, many months, which we don't probably have or feel confident to finance that time. And we need to get on this. And I said, okay, I'm not going to argue, but huge mistake. How would I have done this differently? What happened? We felt.
I was about to ask you. You knew the question.
I'll be very honest with you. Again,
Please.
let me give you the mental state of everyone. We, even as a team, we had tremendous momentum building this project. We actually had really good wins, and we saw this thing develop week after week. Obviously, it took a long time in the beginning, but it started to come out. It started being used, and everybody was excited. You got really sucked into that and momentum and that energy, and you really did. You were very optimistic, right? Now, and you didn't kind of feel like you wanted to be, how do I say, a party pooper or a buzz killer or but. There's still, personally, I had that spidey sense that said, you know what you're now asking us to do is to go into a completely different gear and turn this MVP into a consumer grade, everything, fully working, all of it leading up to this one pivotal fucking event. And what I should have done was the following, was to say, okay, if that's what you want to do, you have the obligation, or you have the prerogative as a CEO, as a customer, to do that. However, we have the right to protect ourselves as much as possible. And in that moment, what that meant, and I told him, by the way, I voiced this out during an all hands meeting. This was the way that I thought I could protect myself, because we had a good relationship. There was nothing, that I noticed about this guy yet that was really evil or, backstabbing or anything like that. So I felt I could honestly say, hey, Josh, by the way, you're putting us in a risky situation. Therefore, I just want to publicly state that whatever the outcome was going to be at this event, and we're going to do our damn best to get you there and make it happen and de-risk it. But whatever the outcome is, because we know this thing could not work out for whatever reasons that are out of our control, I don't want our balance that is due to us, any outstanding invoices, or the fact that you've retained us, as our contract states, every month ahead of time, you retain those hours for the next month in November, that any of those things are at all going to be contingent on the success of the event.
Right.
I should have put all of that very clearly, as I just articulated, into the contract, appended it, have him sign, have his lawyers look at it, have him say, oh, I owe you back 2 invoices. Let me pay that up front right now. And go even further, I could even say, pay another deposit going forward, just to cut even more risk out. But at the very least, sign a contract that just clearly outlines that and goes that way. I didn't do that because I'm in a meeting like I am with you, and there's 5 other people witnessing it. And he's saying, you know what, Artur, I totally understand that. And the phrase was, don't worry, man, I won't stiff you. And that's like, the kiss of death, the phrase of like that. And I should have really, said, well, if that's what you feel, let's sign it and let's move on. And I didn't do that. It didn't occur to me, didn't feel right to do that. I felt like I had enough, assurances that we'd go for it. So we went for it. And the idea was tactfully, strategically, to de-risk the project as much as possible. And believe it or not, my friend, the CTO, he understood it, and the CEO understood it. And that simply meant it was going to be 2 things. We remove all of these extravagant, nice to have features that they always either some wanted way back when, or that they came up along the way and they discovered it would be nice to have. We started to slice them away, and we told them, like, we need to remove these features, because all these things, we're going into a different mode. The mode is, get this project into a more stable version, and start, once that's stable, then we could start stress testing it, and then we could look into improving it. And they were all up for that. And they actually did that disciplined task, which is not easy to do, is to cut things out and to put them in the ice box and put that out. But we also told them the other thing that was just as important, which was, we need to start testing, not just internally testing. No. You need to start testing with the audience, because every user is going to have a different machine, a different internet connection. We saw during our past 2 tests and events that things didn't perfectly go well. And we saw, different users have different grades of experiences. But it was acceptable enough to get other information that we needed about the product and to continue production. And we assumed that these other streaming shortcomings would be improved by the streaming team along the way. And they felt confident that it could be done by just simply getting more performance servers and adding more, upgrades like that. But the detail, the dark aspect of that was we didn't, as a team, my team, had no control over the testing aspects of this product. We were constantly asking them for that, saying, hey, you want to do a big party? How many do you expect? Oh, a few hundred. Well, we need to test a few hundred. Can you do that? Yeah, we'll get on that. We'll do that. And what happens? They don't, the CEO and his team, they're all like now focusing on Halloween and setting up all this production and hiring the talent, and all that stuff takes time. But they didn't quite take to heart how important it was to get a few hundred people into the next test. And when they did the next test, they only delivered 50, 60 people. So when that test happened, it was a success. It was stable. There was a live event and everything worked accordingly, more or less. But we knew better, and we were like, no, okay, that's nice, but we know that it's still not something to, wash your hands off. You still need to replicate the event that you want to have. And
at this point, could you have just taken the testing into your own hands, gotten 100 people, or?
No. That's the unfortunate thing. Why? Actually, I'm just gonna back up. There should have been, if I didn't have, when he decided to go full steam into this thing, one of those clauses besides the payment and all this stuff, it should have been explicit about, like, also you need to have at least 2 or 3 tests, whatever the number is, of these amount of people. That should have been explicit in the contract again, so as a target. And even the fact that afterwards I didn't do that in the contract, and it came up that the first major stress test was only 50 and wasn't the 2 or 3 or 400 that was required. I could have, at that point, again, another opportunity for me to just walk away and say, hey, you're not providing this. You're putting us in more risk. We don't like the way you're testing this. We know this is going to be set up for failure. If you don't do this by the next week, we're not working. We're walking away from this. This is blah, blah, blah. And we just let that slide because we expected the next stress test for them to do that. And again, they fell short. And so what happened was during these meetings, Neil, the cloud guy, the CEO would rightfully ask, well, Neil, what do you think, man? Do you think we could sustain like 300-400? Oh yeah, sure, Josh, no problem. I think we can confidently do that. Yeah, we can do 200-300, because from his perspective, he saw a much more, again, he was looking at numbers that were server performance. And the server performance basically says, oh, I could sustain, he had a benchmark, and at 50 users, the line was really low and stable. So he calculates, well, 5 times that should raise the benchmark up to here, and it'll be way below any kind of redlining, no problem. But here's the thing. The experience is not about just how stable the server is and how well it sends shit out, the information. It's also how well the client can receive and consume that high bandwidth information, and how well it performs and shows you that information that the customer is expecting. And because the customer has variable bandwidth issues, variable processor device issues, that's going to be all over the place. And in order to mitigate that, you have to have some very fancy multivariable rates of server side video streaming, music streaming processes that were mentioned, that were going to be done during our first discovery call with Neil, with the CTO. They had that foresight. They knew at some point they would need to be getting into that level of customization. So we as a team thought, fine, you guys are taking care of it. That's your role. It's in the contract. We don't touch that. We didn't think anything about that. But apparently that aspect of the code of the server was never really focused on. And that's actually, to be honest with you, okay, it should have been maybe the first thing, but even if it's not the first thing, the thing about software development and especially agile development is sometimes it's not a deal breaker all the time. You can round trip back to that after doing some tests and failing and saying, oh, well, actually,
we tweak this
issue, let's tweak this and let's focus the next 2 or 3 sprints on that. So when we had the main event, and prior to the main event, a week before, a few days before, we have an all hands meeting, and we all know, what state of this thing is. And the CEO even says, guys, pep talk, this is going to be great. Everybody's going to help and, be all hands on deck. And in case things go wrong, we're all going to be reacting to it. And I don't worry if there's things that are not going to be perfect. I understand that. So he said all the things that mentally one would need to think and actually embody as a CEO and as an owner of a product that you have forced into another accelerated high-risk mode, and that you had expressed the ability of what they call fault tolerance. You had enough of it to say, that's accepted. The point is, let's at least not have a complete blackout and disaster. Let's try to avoid that. And they came up with some ideas there that were good, which was like, let's have a kill switch. What happens if, like we said, the CEO said, well, what happens if there's like 1,000 people hitting that event? What's going to happen? And Neil would be like, well, we're not sure, but just as a safety precaution, let's have a hard number, like 300, that we would only allow in. And if there's more people coming in, we'll just tell them on live chat and on the application. We actually made an application error message that said, oh, this party's going too well, it's full, come back in a few minutes, maybe you can get in, like a club. And that was the way that they wanted to mitigate an overabundance of people hitting the event. And that was it. And the rest we'll just deal with. And I know that things are not going to be perfect. And we're like, okay, great. Sounds like everybody's on the same mental plan. We start the thing. Everybody shows up, on time. Everybody wants to log in. There's hundreds of people wanting to get in. And of course, everything kicks in as planned. You have people being shut out randomly, people that were supposed to be in the production that were either friends of the performers that had VIP access. They couldn't get in. And so I'm on intercom live chat, just scrambling away, talking to all these people that are screaming at you, and I'm keeping them cool. That was at least the most I can do personally. My development team is working with Neil, trying to look at all of these spikes and why the client application was throwing errors for the video bridge, which is the streaming component, saying video bridge error, da 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 da. And an hour into this chaos, we had about 60 people that were able to see the service, and then everyone else weren't. And then you had multiple people, multiple moments where the CTO was resetting the whole application. And even at one time, we had to release a different version, asking people to download it again. They even managed to do that successfully. People did that. And 2 hours into this thing, the main big DJ that they paid a lot of money for was about to come on. And suddenly someone intelligently decided to say, well, let's just change the maximum capacity from 300, which is not working, to the 60 that we know that is. So once they did that, you suddenly had a stable party. The DJ was there, everybody was doing their thing, and it lasted another 2 hours. And we as a team got to finally observe a live application and how people were using it. We got to, because it's a live chat application, live video conferencing application, I was able to get feedback directly from live users, asking them all sorts of things. If they can do this there successfully, what would they do different? It was a golden opportunity for product feedback during the live event. So I was doing that. And my other team was doing some other, little tests along the way. Again, as part of the process. And we thought personally that, wow, that was like a close call, but we managed to salvage a party and we learned a lot of things because we pushed and stress tested the product the way we asked and we wanted to do many, many, many weeks ago. Unfortunately, it happened during this live event. Fine. That was a Friday. At Friday night, after this thing, or Saturday, I emailed the CEO, didn't even go to my friend, emailed him directly, very nicely saying, hey, I'd love to, when you get a chance, I'd love to personally talk to you about, a retro between you and me about what happened. And my goal was to show him the silver lining of the failure, because that's how startups work. You need to know you will be failing in different ways, and there's always a great lesson that you could take from that. And it's important that you do, because you paid a good price for this lesson. And let's leverage that and let's get it, into the next production cycle. And let me personally talk you through that, because I had no idea what the state of mind of this guy was, other than prior to a week before, he seemed that he had the right optimistic, and realistic viewpoint that we were already discussing with him. Now, Monday morning comes around, we have an all hands internal meeting, which was just Neil, my team, and the CTO. And he was like, guys, so what do you think? How do you think that went? And we're like, well, yeah, I guess you could see it as a failure, but we have these assumptions, and we started talking about the idea was to discuss what we're going to focus on for that week. And we all decided on engineering, our team, Neil, to focus on the elephant in the room, the actual core streaming services, and make that fine-tuned to handle that kind of capacity. While my experienced CTO friend would rather, originally, his idea was to band-aid the client app so that there was a way, if that overloading would happen, that there would be a nice degradation of a user experience. And we said, Josh, let's be realistic. Instead of spending all this time trying to make these band-aids, why don't we fix the real problem that's making these things? Why don't we look into that? And I didn't realize this, but he, I think, maybe knew in the back of his head that this is not going to be a simple thing. And we all knew that. We were just hopeful and thinking that maybe Neil could solve this in a few days. Very kind of, code can do that sometimes.
Question. In that conversation where you said, well, we all knew it wasn't a simple thing. He knew, but we were hopeful Neil could solve it. Could you have done anything differently in that conversation? Or should you have done anything differently?
No, we were literally, again, John, the CTO was coming from a bit of a panic. He knew that he was going to deal with a big bomb explosion from the CEO, and it was on his shoulders to come up with a strategy so that this guy doesn't freak out and run away.
Yes.
And not only that he's optimistic and positive that A, we can solve this, and B, it's worth, the unknown amount of time that it's going to take, and that he needs to be ready to finance that and to feel confident that we spent months and months on this. We've done a lot of great work. We're at the precipice of unlocking this. Let's just follow through to the end. That was his role. And that was what I just said during that retro to Josh, to enable him with the words and the energy that I could not have directly with the CEO, because I asked for that meeting and he didn't respond to me. That now Josh, the CTO, would have that ability to start changing the onda, the vibe of this failure into a positive thing, and to not give up. Because in our minds, it was like, my God, like we really felt we were on the cusp of unlocking this aspect, which is important. We all knew it. It's just for whatever reasons, nobody decided to focus on it. We had no control over it. We were always saying that this is going to be a problem. And it's just a question of how big of a problem do you want it to be, right? For some CEOs, it could be like, oh, well, it's not a big thing. It's not going to kill our business because why? We're not in the market yet. So it's there's no money riding on it in terms of like consumers going to be asking for, money back. No, we're still in experimental phase. So if you were a seasoned CEO, you would have a fucking stomach for that kind of step back. And you would look at it in an opportunistic way. And you would keep going, like all CEOs who, went through all the ups and downs, right? But you got to have, a different mind state and a different stomach. And we expected that to happen. Everyone did. We worked for a week, and Friday was going to be our all hands that we had every week with the whole team. And nobody sent us the calendar invite. Nobody said anything. It was all quiet all week. And then I get an email from my dear friend saying, I'm personally making this decision. Nobody else told me to make this decision. And the decision is we're going to cut your team out, you design to dev. And this is a very difficult decision for me to make, especially because we're old friends. And basically I am putting my business opportunities in front of my friendship, and I realized that, and I know I'm going to regret it. And he tried to like really softly, do this, but there was this one paragraph that he had to, I think, put for himself, which was why he validated the fact that we had to be cut, and he felt it was that we didn't have enough instincts and give him enough information that he needed to have about this issue with the project, that it couldn't sustain that many people and that it couldn't scale. And he felt like that was our fault. And it was, if that one paragraph was not there, it would have been very different. But I was really taken to heart by that, because that to me was a complete delusional, had no bearing in the truth that we all understood. And so I called him up. We talked about that. And apparently he was really believing this. And so I tried to, talk about this. And I started to see a flag, which was, wait a second, if he is attempting to make a real case for us being fired, then if that reason is propagated to the CEO, then that CEO will have a reason not to pay any of our past invoices. That was a very clear line that I saw, and I told him that, and I said, Josh, okay, it's one thing, fine. I'm not going to change what you feel and what you think of, and we could all talk about this as a team, which you don't even want to have a better understanding of really who's responsible for what and why we're not even touching that stuff and had nothing to do with us and blah 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 blah. But be aware that if you're telling this to the CEO, he's going to use this against us and he's not going to pay us. And you do understand that we need to get paid, especially at the end of your letter, if you requested that we continue working in a transitionatory capacity. And I said, if we can't get paid, then all of that stuff is just not going to happen. So I try to even pragmatically explain to him that it behooves my friend to ensure that the way we're presented in this fiasco is not so, I don't know what the word is, negatively irresponsible to the point where we don't get paid, because that has a direct effect on our ability to save your ass to transition. Because if we're not part of the transition, you're going to have a much more expensive and harder time. And he understood that. And he's like, you're right. I believe you should get paid. And I said, great. Can I talk to the CEO? Can you give me his number? No, I'm afraid I can't do that. Okay, fine. Can you talk to him and express these points? Yes, I think so. But be aware, I think they're very rigid. Okay, do your best, Josh. Thank you. Okay. He goes. Days go by. I don't hear from him. I send some nice follow-up emails directly to the CEO. I don't hear from him. Very respectful, very nice. But at the same time, one of the emails, the last ones, was very clear. It's like, hey, can we talk as two CEOs to each other very responsibly, respectfully, and can we discuss, the situation? That was it. Just open door, and he didn't respond. A week later, I come back to my friend. I said, hey, I haven't heard back from him. What do you think? Does that mean I didn't know what to assume, but can you tell me? Can you give me some information? Does that mean we're going to have to go as far as getting lawyers? And he's like, yes, I'm afraid so. I'm like, wow, how did that come about? He's like, well, they're very rigid and blah, blah, blah. And it just seemed like he was kind of trying to be very, nice to me, but at the end of the day, I could very clearly see his position was my ass or your ass. And he made a very clear choice. And he chose that. And then, everything kind of went downhill from there,
From there, disasters, legal, understood. I think at this point, it's past the point of no return. And the objective of this podcast is learnings so that we don't reach that point. So from here on in, the listeners can use their imagination for how it turned out. And it's really in everyone's lawyer's hands. So I want to wrap up, step back with some bigger lessons from this, some that which we articulated before. But first, I have one little question, because you actually just mentioned the little fact that I hadn't known when we discussed this before, but it's interesting, where you asked your friend for the CEO's email and he wouldn't give it to you, or phone number. Cell phone. And he wouldn't give it to you, and he wouldn't give you the cell phone. What's interesting about that is, I understood if you work for Apple and your boss won't give you Tim Cook's cell phone number, he probably doesn't even have Tim Cook's cell phone number. But in a tiny little startup, to not even have the cell phone number of this of the CEO, that feels like from the very beginning another yellow flag.
Absolutely, very important to have.
But it's not just important to have for communication reasons. It's like when you're four people doing a little thing we're almost done. When you're just four people doing a little thing together, and they won't even exchange phone numbers, like that makes no sense. Like, do they not trust you from day one? So,
well, to be frank, we never, in my projects, we never used cell phones as a communication. We've always had Slack. We've always had emails. There was never like a challenge of communication. But here's a perfect example where a number like that would be really, really important. Clearly. Sometimes I didn't want my clients to have my WhatsApp just because, it's just personal space and all that stuff. But anyway, it's good to have. Something else, I'm trying to think, okay, here's another like detail, right? It would have been really nice. It would have been essential also for us. We worked on Slack, right? So Slack became really like where all the documented communications happen. And especially you're dealing with this kind of fast moving type of project, it was essential. Now, what happened? Slack at this particular project, and normally, again, this is not something that we do, but it just kind of came about. We did not own, and we were not admins of the Slack. Jago was. So what happened was when it came down time to have evidence of conversations that we had, after we were fired, guess what happened to our Slack access? Josh turned that shit off fast, really quick. And I had to convince him afterwards when I started to say, hey, I need to get some conversations to show the CEO when we were talking about getting paid, which at the time, my friend Josh was saying, yes, you should get paid. And I said, well, in order for me to make my argument, I need to have access to him literally confirming our retention of these hours for this month. Would you mind giving me temporary access to Slack to do that? And I had to scramble and go through all these. And by the way, I didn't have all access. I had only DM access. I didn't have group access. And there was even more information in group access that specifically from my development team told him about warning signs, about, hey, we need tests, and about, no, we're not confirming that we could sustain 200 to 300 people, and this and that and this, all that we don't have access to. But I managed to scrape up enough of a storyline.
This is actually a good point. There's a saying in the law: possession is 9/10 of the law. Like just having this documentation track record, and also documentation, not just forces clarity, it really helps people recreate the narrative to figure out what happened in these cases.
Exactly. So there's that. We had Trello access. Trello was the project management tool, and so we had that at least. Again, we were able to shut that off, as a form of leverage to, see if, because here's what happened. After we were canceled, they took the code. So our lawyers said, look, contract states, if you don't pay in full, you don't have transfer of ownership, and that's theft. You own our property. So, we didn't want to make it easier. We didn't have control of the code at that point. I mean, we had our copy, but then they had their copy. And the only thing we had control of was the project management backlog and Trello, which very important. You would need that if you need to continue the project. Understood.
To wrap up, This is an intense story built up like a movie script.
It is.
Felt like one. Felt like one. You lived the movie. As we discussed it, we articulated a bunch of different lessons during the conversation. I actually took notes. I think I might in the meeting notes summarize some of the lessons. But now, just to wrap up, any higher level, bigger lessons that now we're in the devil in the details. Step back, forest trees.
Big lessons again were be very judicious in choosing the right kind of clients. I would say do as much due diligence, background checks on the client.
That's a good one, because usually clients due diligence the people they're hiring, but if someone wants to give you money, people don't diligence their clients enough.
Do that for sure. Understand,
It's a good one.
that. See what kind of businesses they've done before. Very important. Because you may have like somebody with just an idea and some money, but they just never ever were CEO of anything, and they worked in a big company. That's huge. That gives you a good mental makeup of how to approach them. You don't want to patronize someone who's done 5 startups before and tell them how to do startups, right? So these kinds of things. Beyond that, definitely have a contract that is as protective as possible, that you have a lawyer, it's worth the money to have them look at the things, express to the lawyer what's important to you. And if you say, look, I want to have the lowest possible risk, and that will include, and that should include just very simply the payment terms, so that they're structured in a way that is as safe as possible and that work for you, and that are very clear to the client. And beyond that, obviously understand that if you work with a friend, that by nature, by our psychology, you're going to have much more of a lower, you're going to lower your guard, and that's not a good thing. Just keep, things in check and in line as you would with any other person. It's not to say that don't ever work with friends, but always try to, obviously, from the beginning, have a conversation with your friends. Say, hey, man, I love you, Morgan. You're awesome. But when it comes to me and me working and the way we've never worked before, I'm going to express how you're going to work and how you think and how, it is going to be like, as much as upfront as possible before you get into it. And then, so that it's at least consciously out there, so that there's no surprises.
You could even take that a step further, and not just about how you'll work, think through different breakdown scenarios. To each you could say to each other, what if it turns out you suck at XYZ? And I'm frustrated that you suck. How do we deal with that? Just having that conversation and thinking through that beforehand makes it much easier in case that ever does happen.
Absolutely. And really, when a project fundamentally goes and reroutes itself into a very different type of engagement, that is the perfect time to go back to the contract, to the lawyer, and come back to the customer with.
Actually, I understood. I hadn't thought of that one before. That's a good one. That when projects inflect, when they change or big something happens, that's a good moment to start a conversation about the terms of the engagement.
Essential. And in our case, there was the plus of it would be, actually, if we are going to turn a new leaf and get into a new mode, then if there's anything outstanding that needs to be made whole, such as an outstanding invoice, this is a great moment, because, to be honest, they are in the best mental position to mutually resolve that, rather than a few months later when they're like, oh, you screwed us because you didn't make what I assumed you would do, and it's all your fault, and I have all this ammunition against you that's either real or not, doesn't matter. They have the upper hand, and it's not a good place to be in at the end of the day. So that was, I think, the top level thing.
These are great lessons. This is the first one ever. I thought it would be 15 minutes. It's now been more than an hour and a half. But you're a talker, but the details really paint a powerful story. This is great. Thank you for your time, Artur. and everyone listening, I hope you've made it through to this point. I almost want to put in an Easter egg. Today, send me an email if you say you actually listen to the hour and a half, and then let's chat and thank you to our guest.
I hope I hope this does some good out there. And
I hope other people have learned from the pain that you suffered.
Yeah. On the bright side, Brad Pitt is going to be starring as me in the lead role of an upcoming movie. I'm still working on the co-star, but yeah, there's some good things.
Exciting movie script. It could, if not a movie, it could be a short Netflix series special.
At least a short Netflix series.
At least that. Okay.
Thank you, Morgan.
Bye.